Wonderhussy here, out in the middle of nowhere as usual, wearing my archaeologist costume because it's time for another prehistoric adventure. This time right in my own backyard, just east of Death Valley. This is the Clay Castle, or at least that's what they call it, because up until as recently as the 1970s, old borax miners used to live in cave homes that they basically carved into these weird kind of mud formations. And I'd love to go in there and give you a closer look, but unfortunately, it's fenced off, no trespassing, security cameras in use, and that's probably because they're afraid people are going to go in there and drink beer and start fires and trash the place. And well, golly, who can blame them? Because that's probably exactly what would happen. But that's okay. You can still get the idea of what I'm going to be talking about by just loitering around outside these mysterious mud hills, which are actually sediments that were once at the bottom of a giant lake. That's right, believe it or not, millions of years ago, this extraordinarily dry, baking, barren landscape was actually lush and tropical. This was back during the Pleistocene Ice Age, when I guess most of North America was covered in giant sheets of ice. And while there were never any glaciers down here in Death Valley, the climate was much cooler and much wetter. There was much more rain, so there were more trees and enough grasses to support an entire ecosystem of ancient animals. I'm actually standing at the bottom, or maybe at the shore, of what was once the giant ancient Lake Tecopa. That's right, 2.5 million years ago, I would be standing underwater. Unfortunately, today there's no water here, just blistering, baking, blazing desert sunshine, and whoo-wee, it is hot out here, so I better shoot this outdoor footage fast. I guess that's what I get for trying to shoot a video on the edge of Death Valley in the middle of June. Anyway, back when this was all a lake, all kinds of prehistoric animals lived out here, and they left footprints in the mud. And the really crazy thing is, you can still see those footprints to this day. That's right, I've been sworn to secrecy, and I mean really sworn to secrecy, so I can't say exactly where these footprints are, but I was actually lucky enough to see them once. Somebody showed me these footprints in the mud of an ancient horse, an ancient camel, and an ancient wolf. You know, probably like a dire wolf, that prehistoric dire wolf that was basically just like a giant wolf on steroids, I guess. Anyway, there's a camel, a horse, and a wolf footprint. And I think even like a mama mastodon or mammoth and a baby mammoth footprint. Like you could see the baby was walking next to the mom. These footprints are just sitting out in the mud in some random canyon. You would never know where it is, and you would never be able to find it unless you knew exactly where it was, because these archaeologists or paleontologists, whatever you call the people that find that kind of stuff, they keep the footprints covered with a layer of dirt and like gravel, rocks, just like kind of sweep it over so you'd never know they were there, which I think is a real shame because, in my opinion, million-year-old animal tracks, that should be like a UNESCO World Heritage Site or something like that. You know, like, wouldn't people want to see that? Unfortunately, I guess they just don't have the funding out here to, you know, properly protect the footprints because, you know, we are out here in the middle of nowhere, and it's kind of, let's just say, an economically disadvantaged area. There's not a lot of funding out here to protect these footprints, and if everybody knew where they were, you know how that goes, people would come in and vandalize them, or even worse, probably try to cut them out and steal them. But even though these so-called circus parade footprints are pretty much hidden by dirt and gravel, and that is what they call them, by the way, the circus parade footprints, I guess because it's all these different kinds of animals, like a circus parade. Anyway, even though you can't see those, you can see something that's even more amazing. Okay, I guess back in 1981, a group of geology students from Sonoma State University in Northern California were doing some kind of field work down here. I'm not sure what kind of field work they were doing, but there's all kinds of crazy geology in this area, so geology students are always down here poking around for something. Anyway, in the course of whatever it was they were doing, they somehow stumbled on the remains of a ginormous ancient mammoth, pretty much perfectly preserved in the layers of sediment at what used to be the shore of prehistoric Lake Tecopa. Okay, a mammoth. You know, kind of like a woolly mammoth, only I guess there's a difference between regular mammoths and woolly mammoths, and this was a regular mammoth. Anyway, you know what I mean, those giant animals that you see in these old sci-fi movies like 1 million BC. Well, apparently there were mammoths, mastodons, and something called gomphotheres. I don't know how to pronounce any of this. I tried looking it up online, but surprisingly, there's not a lot of information available as to how to pronounce gomphothera, or the name of the whole family, I guess, is Proboscidean, I think is how you say it. Proboscideans. I think it comes from the same Latin root as proboscis. You know, it's like a fancy word for your nose. Well, Proboscideans were all ancient animals that had long trunks, which elephants, I think, are a descendant of these mammoths, mastodons, and gomphotheres. Anyway, these geology students found pretty extensive remains of a bunch of mammoths, and it was a big friggin' deal. I guess somehow, going by the layers of sediment, they were able to date them to over 600,000 years old. I guess the bones were found in this one layer of sediment that was below a layer of volcanic ash, and they somehow kind of knew when that volcanic explosion was. So that's sort of more or less how they were able to date them to being over 600,000 years old. But that also made them among the oldest mammoths ever found. In fact, I don't even think they were regular mammoths. They were some old ancient type of mammoth called an Archiscodon. Oh gosh, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong too. I don't know anything about Archiscodons or mammoths or gomphotheres. I just know that finding these bones was a real big deal. So I guess these geology students basically dropped whatever it was they were doing and started excavating as many of these mammoth bones as they could. Which I actually think is weird. Like, if I'm a geology student and I'm out in the field and I stumble on some mammoth bones, I don't know, wouldn't you call the archaeology department and have those students come excavate? Because I feel like archaeology students would know more about protocols and like the proper way to excavate things. Geology students, I mean, no offense intended to geology students, but I don't know, maybe they wouldn't be quite as careful with bones and specimens and stuff. I don't know, or if it was something that old, it seems to me like, wouldn't they call the National Geographic Society or something? Or, well, maybe the National Geographic Society only does human remains. I don't know. I just think it's weird that these geology students basically set about excavating all these mammoth bones, and apparently I think the final count, they found somewhere between 3 and 5 mammoths, or parts from 3 to 5 different mammoths, and even a pair of mastodon tusks. I guess a mastodon is basically like a smaller version of a mammoth. Anyway, it was a pretty amazing discovery for this weird, blighted little area on the edge of Death Valley, and everyone was super excited about it. Even the high school students over in Pahrump, at Pahrump High School back in the day, I guess the science and geology students there got all fired up, and they had a bake sale to help raise money to support these geology students who were excavating these mammoth bones out here in the desert. Again, I'm really puzzled as to why they didn't have better funding and why these geology students were doing all the work, and well, it just sounded like it was a real hardscrabble operation. So the kids in Pahrump got in on it. Everybody was all excited. There were stories in the news about it. The news even came out here once in a helicopter to do a story about it. It was big news for this area, you know? Say what you will about Pahrump. Pahrump's the biggest town in this area, but, you know, it's got kind of a reputation issue, you know? Like, everyone laughs at it. It's the butt of everyone's jokes. Well, it was pretty exciting for the people in Pahrump that this pretty significant archaeological discovery was made right in their backyard. But guess what happened when they finally got the bones out of the ground? They took them back up north to Sonoma State University. Ain't that always the way? These big city slicker folks come down here and start messing around and find these valuable bones, and next thing you know, they whisk them away back up to their ivory tower on the hill in beautiful Sonoma County up north, which, by the way, we're also in California down here. Is just a different kind of California. But yeah, I'm sure there were plenty of locals down here who were more than a little salty that their significant archaeological find was stolen from them. But, you know, realistically, like I said, this is an economically disadvantaged area, and Pahrump isn't really known for its museums. There is a really cool little museum in Pahrump that I do want to go check out, but, you know, they really didn't have the facility to properly store and display these amazing mammoth bones. So they went up to Sonoma State University, and they were up there for over 10 years, I think, until finally, in the late 90s, I guess they were remodeling the wing of the university where they kept the mammoth bones, and they decided they didn't need them anymore. They had outlived their usefulness. You know, they did all the research they needed to on them. And so they finally gave the mammoth bones back to the town of Shoshone. Now, if you've ever been to Shoshone, it's a really cool, funky little desert town, and it's got this really cool old museum. And that museum, at the time, wasn't really big enough to house these mammoth bones, but they built a whole extra wing. Somehow they raised the money to build a whole extra wing. And so to this day, you can actually go to the Shoshone Museum and look at the mammoth bones. So I thought it might be fun if we got in the car, into the blessed air conditioning, and drove over to the Shoshone Museum to see these mammoth bones for ourselves. Okay, check out how cool this little museum is. First of all, if you bought my 2023 calendar, you might recognize the June photo. It was taken right out front here in front of one of these gas pumps. I guess this building that the museum is in used to be an old gas station. Actually, I think this building used to be a bunch of different things. It was a miners' union office or something. I don't know. It was moved several times, and then it ended up here where I guess it did operate as a service station before becoming the Shoshone Museum. And it's a really cool little place to poke around. You can see there's a sign on the door that says free. That's because admission to the museum is totally free, so I definitely recommend stopping in here if you're ever passing through this part of the country. And we're going to go inside in a minute. But before we go inside, I just want to show you some of the cool stuff they have out front. Okay, I know we're here to see the mammoth bones, but this is pretty cool out front. They have these really neat old gas pumps and this super cool old car, which I've said this once, I'll say it a million times. I don't know anything about cars, but somebody watching this video will definitely know exactly what this was, what year, what make, what model. Look at the front. Oh, it was a Chevy. Look at the old license plate. Oh man, now I really feel like Indiana Jones, because wasn't that movie supposed to take place in the 1930s? This just kind of seems like the kind of car Indiana Jones would be driving. Anyway, besides the old car and the old gas pumps, there's also a ton of old mining equipment on display out in front of the museum. I mean, a ton of stuff. They've got some ore carts. Oh, look, an A-frame from the Epsom salt monorail. Wow, this is cool. I guess over on the other side of Death Valley by Trona, there was an Epsom salts monorail, and I think you might still be able to go out there and see the remains of it, or the ruins of it. I kind of want to do a video about that too. Anyway, I don't know what all this stuff is, but there's little signs kind of explaining. There's the assay rock crusher. This right here was the dry washer. And this was the shaker table. Pretty cool. Anyway, if you're into mining history, you should definitely hit this place up because, yeah, not only do they have this cool display out front, but there's a bunch of interesting stuff inside too. And look at this. If you're not into old cars or old mining equipment, but you like geology, there's also this really interesting display talking about the geology of the area. So I guess here you can see Tecopa lake beds. That's the layer of sediment that they found these mammoth bones in. Okay, let's go inside the museum and check out these mammoth bones for ourselves. Hi.
Hello, welcome to the Shoshone Museum.
Who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah, who are you?
I'm John.
Hey, John. John's actually my neighbor. We know each other well.
We do. We are friends. Yes.
Now, do you mind if we go look
No, let's
at the
go check
mammoth
out the
bones?
mammoth. It's found here between Shoshone and Tecopa, closer to Tecopa.
Closer? So you guys don't say exactly where it was found?
Definitely an undisclosed location. We don't want people trancing around.
Yeah, that's why you got to keep the stuff in a museum like this. So let's check it out. And now, are these the actual bones or are these replicas?
Yeah, no, this is really fascinating. So they assume it's like 3 to 5 different mammoths combined here to make this picture.
Well, it's mammoths and that says mastodon.
The edges are mastodon.
Okay, so these are mastodon
Right.
bones. Oh my god, look how
Right.
massive they are.
And then the replica of the mammoth is 3 to 5 combined.
So this is sort of arranged in the form.
So that it looks like a laying down mammoth.
Oh, I see.
So you can see the tailbone and the backbone are fabricated to complete the picture.
Oh, I see. So this thing
Everything
here,
else
that
is real.
they
You can see it's obvious, right?
Wow.
Everything else is real and very fascinating. These are actual bones. They've never fossilized, Don't ask me exactly what that means.
Oh, I was just going to ask
Yeah,
you.
it's a mineralization process. I don't know how it happens, but they've never fossilized, and they are not a cast. Those are the actual bones that came out of the ground.
Okay, wow, John actually had to go talk to some customers. Believe it or not, even though it's the middle of June in Death Valley, there's always people coming in this museum because it's such a cool little place. Oh, look here. There's even some camel and horse tracks. Okay, these aren't the ones I was talking about earlier that are just out in the desert randomly, but look, you can see here, the sign says they're 12 million years old from the area around the China Ranch date farm. Wow, you can see that perfectly. Camel and horse tracks. So funny to think about camels roaming around this area, but I guess they did. Oh, here's some more horse tracks. And there's even a wolf track up there. Wow, this is unbelievable. Oh, look, here's a picture. I guess that's what this camel looked like, and it doesn't really look like the camel you think of today. I don't care who you are. That's pretty impressive. And I think it's actually really cool that this is a really small museum. Okay, remember, this used to be a freaking gas station, and they had to build this whole wing specifically just to house these mammoth bones. Just kind of a cool, almost like David and Goliath type story, you know? Small town museum finds this crazy archaeological find and then somehow scrabbles together the money to build a wing to house it. Okay, these mammoth bones are really interesting, but there's also a bunch of other cool stuff in this museum. And since they're only open for another half hour, let's go check some of the other stuff out before they close. So if you're into rocks, rock hounding, there's all kinds of cool rock samples here. Colemanite, ulexite, bakerite. Actually, that reminds me of a joke one of my geology friends told me. When we're out like looking around in the desert and we find a cool rock, or a rock that I think is cool, you know, I show it to him and he'll go, I think that's a leverite. Oh, leverite? Oh, what's that? Leverite there. Basically, it means that it's not worth anything. Look at this giant piece of colemanite that was found in the Billy mine in Death Valley. Wow, that is beautiful. Oh, here's a really cool display. You guys are gonna love this. Okay, apparently back in 1969, an SR-71 spy plane crashed just outside this museum, basically. I actually have an idea of where the general crash site area was, and it's less than a mile from here. It's pretty wild. Anyway, back on December 18th, 1969, this SR-71 went down, and I guess as part of the recovery process, you know, they go in, especially with those high-tech spy planes, they go in and pick up every little bit of wreckage. And it's pretty impressive to me that they let this museum have all these bits and pieces. You know, a lot of stuff here. Oh, well, look, here's a picture of the smoke plume from the actual crash. Oh, man, look, this is like a transcript, I guess, of well, not the black box, whatever, the last transmission from the pilot. Dutch 68, say your altitude. Dutch 68, say your altitude. Dutch 68, Dutch 68. No answer. Okay, let's see what else they have in this museum. I mean, here's a whole display. For those of you interested in railroads, and I know there's a number of you, there's a whole display here about the T&T Railroad. There's some old railroad equipment down here. Look, a blasting machine, a detonator. Oh my gosh, it says, try it. It's not so easy. Raise handle, push it down hard and fast. The charge will light the small light. Oh wow, so I guess if I push this down fast enough, the charge will light this little light bulb. Let me see if I can do it. That's friggin' cool, but wow, yeah, you really do have to put some muscle into it. Okay, now here's a bunch of stuff about the town of Tecopa, which was a big mining settlement. And hot springs. Anyway, there's a bunch of photos from old historic Tecopa. Look, there's Chief Tecopa. That's the Paiute Indian chief who the town's named after. I made a whole video about him one time because he has a very interesting story. Oh my gosh, yeah, look at these old pioneers sitting at the hot spring. I mean, you don't think of these old timers as soaking in hot springs, but I guess they did. You know, that's probably how they stayed clean back then. Old artifacts, look at this. It's an old moonshine still that was found in the bushes near Resting Spring. Wow, look at that. Bunch of really old liquor bottles from the Prohibition era. Help me to keep him pure. Please vote against the sale of liquors. These buzzkill prohibitionists. And then there's really cool stories about some of these actual characters who lived in this area, backstories. Like, look at this guy, Jack Madison, Shoshone's most famous bootlegger. Oh, look, there's Seldom Seen Slim. He's a big Death Valley character. Oh, there's Shorty Harris, another famous Death Valley character. Oh, here's a display all about borax, the natural laundry booster, and this, oh my God, this old-timey washing machine. Look at that. You just have to crank this handle. And then as if washing the freaking clothes wasn't hard enough, then you had to run them through this wringer, like squeeze all the water out of them before you hung them on the line. Like, doing a load of laundry back then was exhausting. Oh, look, here's an old evaporative cooler. This is like an early evaporative cooler. I can't imagine how this thing even worked. I mean, I guess you put your food in there and you got the burlap on the outside wet, and that somehow kept things cool. Okay, here's a really cool exhibit on Death Valley women. These are notable women who lived in this area. Celeste Lyle Lowe. Oh, look, Virginia May Delight. That's the lady who founded Delight's Hot Spring. Oh my God, what a friggin' boss. If you've ever been to Delight's Hot Spring, it's one of the hot springs resorts in Tecopa. Really cool place with a beautiful warm spring swimming pool. It sounds really nice right now. Anyway, if I'm lucky, maybe they'll put my picture up on the Death Valley Women board one of these days.
Fun.
What? Do you think they will, John?
I wonder what strings we need to pull for that.
I don't know, but I think between the two of us, we can find those strings and give them a yank. Okay, John's here counting the take for the day.
The money. This is our donations for the day.
Yeah, well, how many donations did you make today?
Sadly, $38.
$38?
It's summertime. You know, we're thankful somebody left us a 20.
That's nice, yeah.
Yes.
They do have a donation box if you do come in. You know, at least give us $5. Yeah, it's a cool place. Or even if you don't want to donate money, they have a ton of really cool stuff you could buy here. Tons of really cool books, beautiful jewelry, little souvenirs, stuffed animals. Hey, John, thank you for letting us see the bones.
Yes.
Thanks for the information.
You're absolutely welcome.
Yeah, and I see you have this book for sale here, A Tale of Two Elephants.
$4.95. How can you go wrong? Extremely informative about the
Yes.
mammoth and the geology, how all this was formed.
This is the book I read that had all the information that I got for this video. So if you happen to come in here, consider buying a copy for yourself. Consider putting a few bucks in the donation jar. And don't forget to say hi to John.
Hi and goodbye, everybody. Thank you, Sarah Jane. You are beautiful.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go check out one more thing before I leave Shoshone. How about that museum? Such a cool place. Fascinating reading about those mammoths and mastodons and archistodons and, oh gosh, I already forgot all the words. Anyway, before I leave Shoshone, there's one other animal I want to check out. And it's not extinct. And it's not just bones. And they're hiding back here in this enclosure. Hi, fellers. Look, here's the desert tortoise. Here's these little guys that live in this pen right behind the Charles Brown Market. Oh, look at him. Okay, little feller, I'll leave you alone. It's too hot out here anyway. I guess I'm just gonna go home in the air conditioning and take off this archaeology costume. Anyway, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. I thought it was absolutely fascinating learning about those mammoth bones. And if you happen to be driving through this area, well, stop into the Shoshone Museum and check them out for yourself.